evening, and welcome to Venice Island from a Distance. Venice Island is a community-based performing arts center that believes in the power of arts and entertainment as a way of bringing people together and fostering community. As such, we have a responsibility to amplify the important work of marginalized voices in our community and to advance the conversation surrounding race and the arts, a conversation that has reached a fever pitch in light of recent civil unrest. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are not able to have these voices live on our stage. So instead, every Monday night through the end of August, we will be posting informal interviews with artists and collaborators and voices in our city who have much to say about the role of arts and culture in the midst of racial, political, health, and financial crises. Our very first guest is a Grammy-nominated hip-hop legend, Dice Raw from The Roots, whose decades-long career includes chart-selling albums and major music collaborations with artists such as Jill Scott, Young Jeezy, and The Trap. In recent years, Dice Raw has turned his attention to the theater, creating original hip-hop musicals such as The Last Jimmy, based on his acclaimed 2013 album Jimmy's Back, which deals with the incarceration of young Black men in Philadelphia, and also The King of Love and Box, both of which performed here at Venice Island last winter. Last week, Dice Raw joined me via Zoom, and here is that conversation.
Noah, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you as well, virtually.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm so happy that you were able to make the time, Dice Raw. As I said, you were here with us at Venice Island just in January, doing a short run of your shows, Box and The King of Love. And even though that was earlier this year, doesn't that feel like 5 years ago?
It does feel like it was some time ago, definitely, especially not being able to interact with people it's almost like awkward now, even thinking about it,
right.
Of how not that long ago it actually is, so.
Absolutely. Obviously, so much has changed since, January 2020. These feel like critical times. You and I have discussed it. We talked about some of this stuff last week. But it feels as if in the past several months, we've hit a boiling point, that a lot of the systematic racism that we've dealt with as a country, unfortunately, forever, feels different now. It feels like it's at a boiling point now because we're experiencing it against the background of this global pandemic of COVID-19. So with all that's happening in the world, Carl, I want to start by just asking, how are you? How are you feeling?
I mean, I'm feeling pretty good, and overall, considering what's going on. But at the same time, I've always have had my views on the political climate of this country and other countries, and all over the world. I feel like African Americans and people of color have definitely got the short end of the stick for a long time, and to me, I'm excited to be a part of this movement. I'm excited to be alive at this time because it's definitely an interesting time, to witness what's happening and to witness the outcry, the public outcry, and that people from different backgrounds are very empathetic to what's going on, which I think is definitely helpful for actually pushing the message forward. And but I'm fine. I'm just as angry as I typically am. I'm not any more angrier than usual. But I'm a pretty much angry Black man. Most that.
Of course. But in what way, Carl, do you feel that the conversation and that the movement is different now than it's been before? If you feel that way at all, does it feel different to you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it feels different to everybody, and I think that like we spoke on, there are a lot of different reasons that I think that is different too, and I think that if for people who are people of faith, definitely, I think that God has definitely put his hand into this whole situation, because everybody's like, well, wait, what's happening? Oh, it's a pandemic. Oh, wait, what's going on? There's riots. Oh, wait, what's going on? They killed another black man. Wait, they just another black man? It's like it just keeps kind of going on and going on, and and out of the hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of black men or people of color, or not even people of color, just people who disagree with, the message of white supremacy. Like we speak on in The King of Love, going back to the production that we did at Venice Island, it talks about Andrew Goodman, who was killed during the political movement in the 60s. And I mean, he wasn't, a black man. He just was in the South and had shared a different view than the Ku Klux Klan. You know what I mean? So, I mean, when you think about all of those people who have been killed over the history of, America, and killed in the name of white supremacy, or killed in the name of, segregation, or killed in the name of, abortion, or anything, I definitely think this is a different time. And I think that people are just really smart now, and you have a majority of people who are thinking for themselves. And like we spoke about, social media has a big part of it. Did not be in the NBA has a big part of it. No baseball.
And that people have time. That people have time right now to stop and almost stop and smell the racism. That because of the backdrop of COVID-19, we're home and we're on social media and we're reading the news and we're listening to what people have to say for the first time. To what extent do you think that is fueling the movement and the different voices that are now empathetic to the movement, maybe for the first time?
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, but also I think that when people lose their jobs in mass, and the amount of job loss that we've had over the last 2.5 months, I mean, will make people angry. And then you only really need another thing that's going to be on top of it. And then you just have to, it's almost like you've had enough. It's like, that movie with Michael Douglas, Falling Down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's
like one thing after another keeps hitting you and hitting you and hitting you. And then you start to go crazy. And then I think that, with the neighborhoods being as mixed as they are, and I think that with hip hop and music and pop culture being so integrated with, it's not necessarily a white thing or a black thing anymore. It's kind of like an everybody thing, especially as far as social media, as far as fashion, as far as music. These things are not compartmentalized to like only white people do that, or only black people do that, or only Latin people do that, or only Asian people do that. It's like, no, we all seem to like a lot of the same things now, and we speak this kind of language that's not even the same language, but it's kind of like nuanced and almost like before language type of thing, you know what I'm saying? And we all speak it. And it's like, yo, and you can tell by how somebody's wearing their shirt or wearing their hat or wearing their sneakers, or even if they're wearing sneakers and not, loafers or whatever the case, whatever they're wearing. But just that unspoken language that I think everybody speaks. And I think that really connected with people, on top of losing their jobs, on top of the disease, on top of being stuck in a house with someone that's getting on your nerves, on top of the kids getting on your nerves, and then they're like, wait, they killed another
You're speaking man? From experience.
Another one?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's like, and even white people had to be like, yo, enough is enough. And then you got, the best president that America's ever had on top of that. You who's just hitting out of the park.
You mentioned when last we spoke, Carl, about the three enemies. It's like first Trump gets elected and Trump becomes the enemy. Then COVID-19 hits and spreads, and the job that you mentioned, and the isolation that you've mentioned, and the fear, especially within the arts community, which is what I want to talk about next, the arts community. But then COVID becomes the enemy. And then George Floyd, which reignites this conversation, and then the system becomes the enemy.
Which, the system is, I don't know if the system is definitely broken. And I think that the sad part about the whole psychology of the police department, at least from my perspective, is that what we know about police, just, what are the facts? Just police in general. And I'm not talking about a good cop per se. I'm not talking about a bad cop. I'm just talking about just the psychology of what makes someone want to be a cop in the first place. And a lot of that stuff is fueled by what we see in the media. It's like, hey, you got a cop show where, the cop is the tough guy. He's a good-looking guy. He slams a guy up against the wall who's bothering an old lady who's walking down the street. And it's like, yeah, get him. You know what I'm saying? So it's like that starts the programming. But then the other thing that we know, which appeals to people who make them want to be cops, is the fact that a lot of them were abused children. So when you have that kind of psychological inspiration behind why you want to be a cop in the first place, is because you're trying to protect yourself, or you don't want to be hurt, or maybe you want to protect other people. I mean, there's all kind of different things that go into that, and we know that most cops have been abused as children. So if they're applying that abused child, philosophy to policing, I mean, it's really kind of like, get out of the car now. You do what I tell you to do. It's kind of very much like a bad parent who feels like he has this entitlement to make you do anything he basically says because of the role that's been placed upon him. And, I also think that, well, you going to say something?
Yeah, you're right that role, in a large part, comes from the way we see cops in the media. I didn't even think about that. There's like this, stereotypical loose cannon, lethal weapon style cop, and that's what we see on the streets. Why should we be surprised?
Yeah, and I mean, we don't see really too much of like the Andy Griffin cop.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Like, that's right.
The well-respected, mild-mannered, very relaxed.
Yeah, they're either insane or they're like eating donuts and twiddling their keys, and they don't really do anything.
Yeah, exactly. You see, exactly, like, the cop on The Simpsons. You know what I mean? There's no real person to actually identify, and which is actually not to side with police, but that is a real argument for them, that it's like the police, you don't even look at them as like an actual person. And half of that is their behavior, but half of that is the way that we just perceive different groups of people, like police, soldiers, prisoners, gang members. We just compartmentalize these people. Oh, well, they deserve whatever they signed up for. We just take their identity away from them and take the humanity part away from them, and just and whatever uniform they're wearing is kind of what they become. And and that's even part of black men too. Like, whatever, when you see a black man walking on the street, if he's not dressed in the proper way, you may be like, even as another black man, you may say, oh, well, this could be an issue. I don't know this guy. You know what I'm saying? And at the same time, he's thinking the same thing about you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's all about perspective.
So this, I'd like to segue this into one of the things I'm most interested in talking to you about as an artist, Dice, is, I mean, you have a long history of using your artistry and your music and your platform to advance this kind of social change, to potentially redefine the stereotypes and redefine how we look at people. How important is that? I mean, that seems like a silly question because the answer is probably extremely important. But what do you think the role is of the artist in times like this when so much is so volatile?
Yeah, I mean, like we spoke about this too. I think that artists should just do something, and I kind of just stand by that, because I'm not particularly sure like exactly what we should be doing. But I know we should be doing something. And,
right.
If it's sculpting, if it's painting, if it's poetry, if it's, playing the guitar, if it's playing the piano, if it's playing the drums, even if it's, just screaming at the top of your lungs, in a safe space, you know what I'm saying? But, kind of just expressing yourself in any form that you feel is going to be beneficial to you, healing, one, as the artist, but also an expression that maybe can inspire somebody else to do something and also have some meaning behind it. So
tell us a little bit about Jimmy's Back and how you were able to do that with Jimmy's Back and then The Last Jimmy.
Okay, well, yeah, well, Jimmy's Back was an album that I produced, and it was based off of Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, where I decided to reach out to people who were incarcerated. So I reached out to 8 young African-American men under the age of 30 and asked them to tell me their story personally and be able to grow a friendship with these gentlemen, but then also tell their story on my album, which was Jimmy's Back. And they did that. And, you know, I've created lifelong friendships with some of these guys. And like I told you, like when we added up the jail time that these guys did, like they were under 30, and we added up, they had all had over 100 years in prison. Yeah. And that was kind of like the starting point of the Jimmy's Back album. And then also Jimmy's Back is a dedication to my friend Jimmy Wall Street, and also a play on Jim Crow and New Jim Crow. So that was in 2013. We did it at the Kimmel Center. That's the first demo. Then we did it at, Freedom Theater. We did it at the Prince. We did it at the Democratic National Convention. We were going to do it at Venice Island, and then, everybody got the sniffles. And
yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, well, it may be a little bit more serious than sniffles, but.
So what I'm most fascinated about in regarding this project is how many artistic platforms or how many artistic avenues that this one project went in. You have your 2013 album, Jimmy's Back, but I'm fascinated by the documentary that you created. I don't know how many people know, Dice Raw, you're a filmmaker. That in conjunction with the album, you created a documentary of the same name, Jimmy's Back, which I watched last week, and I think it's stunning, particularly in these times. The fact that you made this 7 years ago, and you could have made it 30 years ago. We're still having the same conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it became the show that you're referring to as well, called The Last Jimmy. It's a show as well.
Yeah, it's a theater performance, The Last Jimmy. When we did the performance for Jimmy's Back, it was kind of theatrical, but I really wasn't trying to be theatrical. I just was trying to make a statement. And everyone who saw it in New York at the Apple Store was like, yo, this is mind-blowing. I could actually see this being a play. So I was like, oh, you know what? That's a good idea. So I reached out to Phil Brown, who's a longtime collaborative partner. You know Phil. And shout out to Phil. And Phil decided to write the book for this play based off of the song "Animal" from Jimmy's Back, which you heard. And I never even thought about it from the aspect of crossing so many different media platforms. But yeah, we definitely did that because we felt as though the message was really important.
So what are you working on now? What's keeping you busy? Are you able? I see you're in your studio now. Is COVID inspiring you to take some writing time, take some working time?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have my COVID projects that, but then I have a new project that we've been working on that is kind of like finally coming out of quarantine, being able to do some more music and add some different elements to it. We have a show called Tables. And Tables is about self-segregation in schools and how there was a lot of, white flight from the city to the suburbs, which created, a resegregation in public schools and even some, in charter schools, et cetera. So, what we're noticing is there are a lot of Black and Latino kids who are basically kind of stuck in the same kind of school. And we know for a fact that when children of different backgrounds sit with each other and learn with each other, it's hugely beneficial for the future. And not just for our future, but for their own personal gain. It's like, when I went to school, I had white classmates. I had Black classmates. I had Latin classmates. And I wasn't going to a private school. I had Asian classmates. But now when you go into an urban school, all of that, it's done. And there's definitely been a resegregation of society, whereas though kids who have parents who have affluent backgrounds or actually make more money in a different, wealth class, they go to private schools. And the kids who are poor are kind of left with this substandard education where there's basically 2 to 3 maybe good schools in a huge city like Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles that are available to public schools, and they're really hard to get into as far as testing and everything else. So that's what tables is about. And it all takes place at the lunch table. Because what we notice is when you tell a kid to sit wherever you want them to sit in a classroom, the teacher can kind of manipulate how they want their learning environment to be. But when it comes down to lunch, when the kids get to pick, what they do is they actually sit with their own race, even if the school is segregated. Yeah. So we noticed that, all the white kids sit with each other, all the black kids sit with each other, all the Asian kids sit with each other. And then there's some subgroups where it's like, the pretty girls. So when I went to a school that was diverse, I would sit at a table where there'll be a black girl, a white girl, an Asian girl, a Latin girl, a white girl, an Italian girl, a Jewish girl, a Mediterranean girl, and they would all have the same hairstyle. They would all have the same
there's something that self-identifies that group as a clique, as a
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's just mesmerizing. And then the one thing that we learned of the groups that were the most accepting of all backgrounds were the football team. They didn't care. They didn't even notice color. They didn't, when we did our little test on them, it almost didn't even work because they were so inclusive that it was such a brotherhood that our test to try to break them up and put them in different pockets, it didn't work. And it didn't work on the band kids.
That's so fascinating because, again, there's something that a football team has in common. They have a common objective. They speak common language. They're in the same. There's something that's putting them in the same clique. This is a little bit tangential, but I think about that with sports all the time. Whenever I see like a super conservative athlete from like a deep South athlete or somebody who with a history of, who's the Mets closer? You remember the Mets? There's a closer for the Mets, or was it the Braves? John Bucker, like 20 years ago.
I don't remember.
He was like a total bigot. I think it was the Braves, a closer with the Atlanta Braves. And here he's like winning the World Series with the most diverse group of people who you could possibly imagine when you put them on a baseball field, when you put them on a sports field. There's something that's bigger. We just kind of have to find what it is. But there always seems to be something that's bigger than politics or bigger than race, and it's bigger than individualism too. Because I think a lot of times when we think about somebody being different, we don't think about them being different in the large scheme of hundreds and thousands of people and us all being different, because then that's really ridiculous. But I think that we start the individualism of racism is really crazy, because the band were the same way. The test didn't work on. We say, okay, we want to separate everybody. Now, what's different from this group that's different from that group? And they were like, oh, well, they don't have Lewis over there, and we've got Lewis. So that's the big difference. That was the only difference that they found, was this one guy who was kind of like their mascot of their thing. Was the only difference that they could find, was that he was over there and not with them. And he was the kind of guy that they would just pick on a lot, but they loved him as well. So it just was really interesting. And then we went to a charter school, and the charter school was all boys charter school. And this is where you did your research. Did you go into schools doing research on?
Yeah, we went into schools. We went into different schools. We went into public schools. We went into some hardcore rough schools, and then we went into some, diverse schools. And this was all commissioned by the Adrian Arts Center in Miami. Shout out to Adrian Arts, Liz Wallace and Hyro and Ellen, all of my guys down there. So, but yes, we went into schools and we did this program that actually Hyro, who's the vice president over there, he put together this lesson plan and the way that we could communicate with children to kind of get information from them and do this show together. So,
where are you in your development process right now? Have there been any readings or workshops?
Well, we're actually going to do a private reading for the Netter Center. We were going to do it at Venice Island this summer.
I
know. And so we're putting together a virtual table reading, because like everybody else, we're all virtual. Yep. And so we'll be doing that July 31st.
Awesome.
And that's for the Netter Center in Penn University.
You're going to have to come back and tell us how that went. And then hopefully there's going to be a time soon where we reconvene for theater and when we can see that piece in person.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go.
And I guess my last question then, and I'm just curious, this is not something you and I have previously discussed, but I'm curious. Obviously, we were all hopeful that there will be a time where we can sit in the theater together and have these conversations and workshop tables in front of a student group, potentially here at Venice Island, potentially someplace else. In your best case scenario, Carl, both with, the hope that we find a vaccine and that COVID improves, but more so with the way we deal with each other as communities and in this country, with with the racial boiling point that we're at. Best case scenario, where do you see ourselves in 6 months? And worst case scenario, where do you see ourselves in 6 months?
Okay, best case scenario. I mean, totally best case scenario. I say that this what is it? Remdesivir, or what is no Gilead. Gilead had something that's like Remdesivir, or Gilead. They've got the cure, right? They said so. They're going to start mass production of that drug is coming soon. So best case scenario, it's done tonight. And we all get to go to, we get dosed, we go to CVS or Starbucks, and you can either get it shot in you or in a latte.
That's right, they put the vaccine in a latte.
You know what I mean? This is best case scenario. This is best case. Children are able to get it through ice cream. And then, but more seriously, I'm definitely more optimistic than some people are. Something came out today where they just said, well, hey, we know that children in schools are definitely not spreading the disease. So children, they don't spread it. So that's one win for being able to do something in the fall as far as live performance as a whole. The other thing is, Fauci. Dr. Fauci said that he's cautiously optimistic about having something by January. So, we could only hope if everyone wears their mask and everyone behaves, I think we could probably beat it a lot faster. But in America, everybody is kind of like into their own thing, and not like, places like Greece that have, virtually no cases, or places like Trinidad that have like virtually no cases. They're like, well, what are they doing down there? And I think those people just have a little bit more of a respect for one another and respect for society as a whole. And they kind of have that we are kind of thing. Where over here, I think that we have a lot of issues too. And here's the thing. The riots and the protests, they may have caused a spike. That may have been, we may have beaten it, and then with those protests, we may have just risen back up. So in any case, small price to pay for freedom and equality, and for people to finally wake up and get it, and for people to be able to participate in the American dream. Small price.
And once again, even more reason why these demonstrations are important, even more indication that they're important, because we're in a time where the simple act of walking down the street, of going to a park, of going to a CVS, there's risk involved. There's risk involved in gathering, and yet we're doing it anyway. We're going out in the streets, and we're coming together, and we're shouting for the things that need to be shouted, and we hope that people are listening.
Yeah, amen to that, brother.
Carl, thanks again for being here. I'll let you go back to your pizzas. If you don't know, Dice Raw has also spent a lot of his COVID time making pizzas.
Yeah, making everything. We cooked yesterday at the studio too, so a bunch of stuff. Crazy.
Well, keep at it, Carl. Thanks again for being here, and have a great rest of your time, man. Please join us, those of you watching. Next, we're back with another installment of Venice Island from a Distance, where we're going to be talking with storyteller and activist Ange Bay. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great night.
When something's in your heart's on your sleeve, then everyone can tell all the hopes and dreams they left behind the shell. And the wives and daughters came into our life while they lift their veil.